let's start.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to present my work at this Human Light Systems 2.0 series of events. I've been tracking and supporting Dr. Korotkov's work for many years, and as founder and head of the Center for Biofield Sciences, we've used the GDV in our research ever since we started, and we've got a number of papers which have been published around the world showing how we've used the system. The good access point, I think, would be ResearchGate. Are you all familiar with ResearchGate? ResearchGate, and the other one is academia.edu, researchgate.net and academia.edu. So if you search my name, Dr. Thornton Streeter, you'll be able to see some of the work that we've done. Our main focus is proving the efficacy of energy medicine protocols, and our lab was established because in the same way that Dr. Korotkov believed or felt that there was clearly something in the subject handed down over thousands of years about the human auric field, and with modern sensitive devices we should be able to measure something. That's the basis of our research. But anyway, I've got lots of wonderful pictures to show you to help me tell this story, and I think it would be appropriate for me to remove my ugly mug and share some of the slides. So here we go. Let's see how we get on. I'm hoping this is all going to work very smoothly. Can you just confirm you can see my screen? It won't. Oh, that was a good one.
Yes.
There it is. Okay, so I'll just go back to the first slide. Calling this session Journey into the Chakras, which is the title of my current workshops that my colleague Billy Shipke and I are taking around the world. We've just had a wonderful tour of Australia. The Center for Biofield Sciences, as I mentioned, is a research institute which was established in the 1990s to investigate the human biofield, and especially the anatomy and physiology. So I'm going to touch on that this morning. We do wear a number of different hats. I represent the Zoroastrian community at the United Nations through their NGO. We have a remit concerning health and education. Obviously, that's very important in the current environment, especially our focus on promoting health choice. I also am the founder of the Energy Medicine Exchange. That's our social networking environment and community. And if you go to Facebook and see the groups, Energy Medicine Exchange, we have about 40,000 members. So it's a global family of practitioners sharing their knowledge and protocols. And up on the top there, the Foundation for Alternative and Integrative Medicine website is FAIM, FAIM.org. Very happy to serve their international team as we promote integrative healthcare around the world. So that's some of my hats, obviously apart from the Center for Human Energy Field, which became the Center for Biofield Sciences. So here we go. And this is where we've been for so many years. Since '98, in fact, we had a suite of research labs in this building, which is called the World Peace Library. It's a United Nations facility, UNESCO chairholder. And we've really had some amazing experiences there. We started out doing a study called the Atlas of Disease States, where we tried to analyze thousands of people's biofields to see the sort of common patterns in the different diseases. And we did this by calibrating a number of different devices, and a very serious team of young scientists, including someone called Rani Menon, who had previously been on a Nobel Prize winning team, spent several years doing this, and it's really the foundation of all the work that we're presenting. So, and now recently we've taken on our own building. One of the things about researching subtle energy is you need a very quiet, controllable environment, and as universities become busier, there's certainly a lot more noise, Wi-Fi, EMFs, generators, and, that can affect the subtle machines that we're working with. So we've taken up this lab of our own, and we also have been initiating research at a lot of other universities. So I'm happy to say that the doors are opening for our field, and I think it's thanks to the dedication of many of the guys who've worked in our labs that we can say this is a possibility now. We must always honour our mentors. Here you can see Dr. Mayor Master Moose, who inspired me all those years ago to study subtle energy. My colleague John Catchpole, who invented the Biofield Viewer with me, who has a pioneer in nonlinear programming. James Oshman, the pioneering author of energy medicine. Harry Oldfield, Electro Crystal Therapy, one of my early mentors. Kimberly Shipke, my colleague and partner as we travel around the world sharing this news. Beverly Rubik, Bruce Lipton, Donna Eden, Deepak Chopra, a fabulous lady, Valerie Hunt, now passed on, Bernie Williams in America, Pop, the famous Biophysics Institute pioneer in Germany, and of course, dear Korotkov, me when I was a bit younger. We've met many times speaking at conferences together, and I was honored when he invited me to St. Petersburg to speak at your conference in the early 2000s, I think it was. And some of the places that we've been to, Paris at the university, we had a big day there presenting about subtle energy in Brazil. I think you might recognize him if you have a keen eye. Big crowds in South America, and the fabulous institute in California. These are just some few examples, called the California Institute of Human Sciences. So now to our subject, really, the biofield. And we've had many channels and continuous streams of knowledge flow through to the current age from the past about our subject. And we're wise to attend to that information. I think if you visit a museum anywhere in the world and observe how many of the figures have some kind of subtle body depicted around them, whether it's in brass, stone, paper, or even wood, you'll see these same patterns, halo, biofield, the actual layers of the biofield. You can see in this painting of the Buddha, there are actually distinctive layers in there. We're, as I said, we're wise to take note of the corroboration. And of course, this is from the Oriental perspective, but as we travel around the rooms of the museum and enter the different halls, so we notice that there's a continuity in this regard for subtle energy by artists involved. And when we think about clairvoyance, were they just clear seeing artists, or are we having a sort of convergence where certain individuals have such a bright field that even the normal artists can see it and can therefore paint it. I think it's a combination of both. And as we dig deeper around the world and investigate this correlation, we really consider these images as maps. And it's just very important for us to understand the legend of the maps. So clearly in this bigger image of a yogi in the lotus position, we can see the flower-like energy centers we call chakras depicted down the center, and a great number of filaments, nadis they're called, each one with names and information there in the Sanskrit. And they're little tiny energy centers you can see on the back of the hand, in the elbows, at the ankles and knees. So what are these chakras? And I think what the rishis were trying to communicate with us by the number of petals as we rise up the spinal cord is that each chakra is responsible for a different range of frequency. And this is very important. The 4 petals are the slower wavelengths on a modern oscilloscope. The 6 petals means it's a slightly faster range. So each chakra is responsible for a certain range of frequency in the spectrum that the human being exists. And this is a fundamental issue, because this is the front line of the body's self-balancing. In order for the human being to go about its daily work and life, these energy centers are opening and closing at various different times, in the same way that a bush would open a flower when it needs something, in the case of a bush to be pollinated. Here we're seeing certain chakras being triggered to be opened by the hormones through the glandular system. And obviously at each gland is the electromagnetic counterpart, and that chakra is like a transponder. Not a flower really, it's more like a satellite dish, which the shape is created by the vortex of energy that is occurring. And a healthy chakra, obviously the frequencies that are being emitted create the perfect shape for the system to then absorb the cosmic frequencies in this particular range. So each chakra has its own specific range, and they're triggered to open. And we notice, as we go on into this presentation, we'll see how that actually happens. But I think it is important for us to recognize the legend in these maps, to test it with modern tools, and to see if we have an array of tools, whether they're all saying the same thing about each individual. And if they are, then we can move forward into a new era of scientifically assessing the biophysics of the human being. And it's funny, because the last 100 years we've dwelt on the biomedical approach, which has been fantastic, and it's served many issues. And we can't fault modern medicine's accident and emergency surgery, pediatric, geriatric care. But if there's another opportunity to integrate this understanding of biophysics and bioenergy and biohealing, then we can really serve our communities much better. And that's really the agenda here as we move forward, even in this discussion. So we're actually speaking from a modern perspective about a human atmosphere. I don't know whether my picture is blocking the words up there or not, but this is just a traditional image. I think it's a Barbara Ann Brennan picture, where we can see these inner penetrating layers. So it's not like an onion. What we're actually seeing is where the body is, there's 9 layers of intensity, 9 layers of field, interlocking layers of energy. And as you go further away from the body, you're able to measure less and less of them till you get to this outer layer of the field. It's just the outer layer. but the central layers where the physical body forms has to have all these other layers of structure for the cells and the information to develop together, as it were. So when we look at the planet and the planet's atmospheric layers, do we have legend here? Is there information in these numbers? We're very well served by modern artists in the same way that we can visit the museum and see hundreds of different cultures revealing their understanding. I think White, Brennan speak to 90 and 130 different cultures which have vocabulary to describe the brow chakra, for example. So this is a globally significant story which has just been separated. Of course, in the olden days, they would hang, draw, and quarter scientists for suggesting that the Earth was round and the sun was round, and we traveled around the sun each year. So they kind of cut a deal with the authority at the time, the church, which is, if you let us study chemistry and astrophysics and various other subjects, we'll leave your sort of sacred science to the pastors and the exorcists, and that story's kind of prevailed into a modern era. So you have a kind of taboo. You don't have it in Russia, and you don't have it in various other countries, but in the West you have this taboo still. It was very much a Christian story, and it's good to know that modern communications and the desire of individuals to find long-term health solutions, and certainly practitioners working in communities to provide long-term health solutions, that we're seeing kind of playing field leveled out a bit at the grassroots level. And again, I think that's what we're doing right now. So looking at this slide, we've got a seamless transition with Alex Gray in his wonderful book Sacred Mirrors, from the skeleton up through the cardiovascular systems, the nervous systems. Here we can see the viscera, and then seamlessly on into various different race naked pictures, and then on into these energetic slides where you can see the chakras and the meridians in the same image, and of course the layers of the field depicted beautifully by his fine brush. And it's interesting because if we think about Gray's anatomy, we wonder why all these aspects of the human being aren't properly documented, and yet we need another fellow called Gray to add the real story for integration. So from our perspective, we're interested in imaging. And you'll notice immediately that we're looking at an orange here, but in 4 different ways. We're looking at it from the naked eye perspective with a normal camera. There's the modern medical approach with a CT scan and an MRI. And then there's the 1940s Kirlian electrograph image. There's actually a book by Thames and Hudson, I think it's called Subtle Body. And there's a wonderful slide there from 1896. A Frenchman took an electrographic image. So it's wonderful that this field has been waiting to be discovered and then waiting to be found to be significant. But from my perspective, it allows me to tell a wonderful story, which is that, you know, orange tree on a very fundamental level is standing rooted in the soil, sucking the living daylights out of the sun. And of course, the tree wants to protect its seeds like a chicken's egg with all these wonderful nutrients. So it creates this ball of light and juice around its seeds. So when that orange falls off the tree and rolls off, there's this perfect supply of nourishment for it. And Adam and Eve weren't stupid. Of course, they realized that this ball of light, this fruit, was a great source of life force as opposed to just nourishment. And they very much set us off on this process of developing our consciousness, because it's this very light in the orange that we see in the Kirlian image. It's actually plasma. This light in plasma form is really the fuel for our consciousness. So we could say that people who eat lots of processed food and fast food are human doings, because they don't have enough of this light in them to really be human beings. A being is someone who's fully immersed in the now, and they've got this wonderful field of light protecting them, which obviously we consume this light. We're rather like a polo mint or a lifesaver, you know, we're a hollow thing. You could put a marble in here and it would come out the end. We'd put the orange in the top. And the gut, of course, is a fractal, the opposite from the tree. And so instead of drawing all the light into itself, as the tree does, the gut sucks all the light out of our fruit. And then we pee out the liquid, and the solid is also eliminated in the bathroom. But our guts are designed to suck shine, protects us, so that all viruses, for example, exist in a certain bandwidth. We'll keep it simple, between 4,500 and 5,500 units per second. So if I'm shining brighter than that, there's no way, like this Icarus, they can get to me. Whereas if my life force fueling is reduced and I just have to rely on my kidneys and what I can breathe, then it's a reduced field, and that virus is now able to penetrate and resonate as my core frequency slows. So I think it's important to add this to the mix, because we know that if we go along for a biopsy and we see a lump like this seed here, you know, we need a more reliable system, because 70% of biopsies prove negative. But we could add the Biofield perspective to the information, and we'd have a much more accurate understanding of what's going on. So in 10 years, with integration with devices like Biowell and Biofield Viewer, we'd know exactly what we're looking at, and then biopsies could be always accurate and relevant and needed. So moving on with this Kirlian image, literally, we can see here how by microwaving the half apple just for a minute, we completely damage the field of the fruit. So it's a very sensitive element, and therefore raw, fresh food is always going to have precedence in a diet for a conscious, smart family than food that's processed and unconsciously prepared, let's say. So the ruler of modern scientists is the electromagnetic spectrum, and I wonder whether that's the real ruler of nature. But anyhow, we have an opportunity to appreciate that each of the medical screening devices that we have in the world, whether it's ultrasound, whether it's in this case thermal imaging or X-ray, or some of these high-end PET imaging devices, they're all allowing us, like a periscope, to peer into a part of the spectrum that our vision won't normally take us. And I always ask the question, at what price? If you think that this wonderful tool, ultrasound, has been responsible for the gendercide of 300 million girls around the world, that's more girls than men died in any wars in the last 100 years. So, and of course, you don't just go sit on a Xerox and you've had your ultrasound. There's a compliance here. Medical professionals take ultrasounds, and if they're having pressure to abort female-only fetuses is happening around the world, it's a crisis in the morality of global healthcare. So that's why I say, at what price? Even these high-end radiation devices. I mean, is it really worth exposing the body to this kind of information, this kind of damage on an atomic level, when we've got techniques which the wavelengths, they can just skirt the cells. The reason why mobile phones are so harmful, because the wavelengths are like baseball size coming at you the whole time. So let's have a look at the techniques that we've got to image the biofield. And I think at this point, it's a great opportunity to introduce that lady I mentioned, Valerie Hunt. She developed, in analog days, an aura camera where you could clearly see something. It's kind of prismatic effect. But it was fascinating. You can see this child in this still image. And as the child arrives and the mother sits in that lotus position, you can actually see her field brightening and brightening and brightening. It's amazing. You also see a wonderful connect between the crown chakra of the mother and the child. There's almost like this ribbon between the two as this child is running around its mum while she's meditating. Really fascinating. And there is a DVD that Valerie Hunt made of a brilliant lecture, which I happened to be at in Regent's College in London. Dare I say it was in '93 or something. And yes, it's called The Human Aura, I think. Yeah, well, definitely you can find it. You can see clips of it on YouTube, but it's worth actually buying the DVD from her institute, because it's a really, really impressive film. And of course, the camera itself was cannibalized at university. All of her equipment was probably put into the next project, and the significance of it was perhaps not fully understood at the time. And there are attempts to recreate the technologies that she made, but the actual camera haven't been able to make it. I think it's because of the analog as opposed to our digital. But you can see, for example, the expanse of the field around this fellow on the beach, especially when someone's kind of praying or meditating. It glows really white. Fascinating. And here someone's eating burger in 1 minute and then starts eating fruit, and you can see how his energy field responds. So we're all kind of saying the same thing with our tools. It's fascinating. So what other scientific perspectives do we have? I think it is very important for us to follow and track what's going on. I mentioned Fritz Albert Popp earlier, and of course he's a wonderful reference for any students who want to get up to speed on the subject of biophotonic emissions. There's also work going on in Japan and Korea in this field. I got a little tickle in my throat. See if cold coffee can sort me out. But the fundamental issue is that the living systems emit biophotons, and at various stages in the day, various times in their cycles, as it were, they may emit more or less biophotons. So there are healthy emission levels. And then if someone's healing, for example, and we're measuring in a square centimeter the biophotonic emissions, we can see biophotonic emissions increasing enormously whilst the healer is working. So that's obviously another very significant factor. And there are papers out there. You can see Choi et al. Biophotonic emissions from the hand from 2004. So again, PubMed, there's stuff out there. It's brilliant. And the close-up of this image, I think it's important because, oh, excuse me, changing the weather for me. Ooh. Luckily, I have not lost my train of thought. Claude Swanson was drawing my attention to this. And I think it's important to use the analogy of the candle at this stage. The human biofield, as we know, is multi-layered. But the flame, in the analogy, remains within the physical body, the body double, we call it. So this is where the biophotonic activity is most intense. and it remains within the flame. And as we use the candle analogy, obviously a long, healthy life for a candle is if there's no wind on it, it's not flickering, we're not seeing spickles of flame, and we're not seeing the 70-year candle burning quickly because the flame is nice and still. Now, when we see the energy field around a candle, the flame is there, but then we also see very distinct glowing gradations. And of course, then in the room, the whole room is illuminated. We can even see the picture on the wall. So we're in the field. We're in the range of the outer layer when we observe a candle, but then there are all these other distinct layers. And of course, if there was moisture in that room, you can see these gradations even clearer as you can around the moon. But my point is with this image, this is the hand of a lab technician, I guess, who's a smoker, maybe a little roll-up cigarettes. And what's happened is the burn and the chemical, the nicotine have damaged somehow the etheric field. And so we're actually seeing biophotons leaking out. This is different from the field radiation, which needs to be bright and sound. But these are sort of extra biophotons leaking out. So it's an indication to holistic practitioners that sort of small hot areas are speaking to us on some level, and we need to understand what that is. So again, Kirlian photography. Well, I was involved with Kirlian photography for many years, and this is an image from a development that a guy called Nigel Garrin-Hutchins made, and I was very happy to support him and fund some of this early development. And we ended up making a device called the Oracle. And as you can see, it's a giant plate where you can actually see through the plate. So it was an early precursor to some of the modern techniques, but using video through a double screen. He sold this to Toyota very successfully, and it traveled around with their exhibitions. People have always been fascinated by the subtle energy. And of course, taking it further, when you interpret the individual full hand, there's a story. And I think it's important for the different schools working with Kirlian to understand each other. For example, in Britain, there's a very long tradition of working with Kirlian photography, with full hand prints and doing the readings as if you were looking at the many life story that you would appreciate if you were doing a palm reading or a reflexology assessment. And in this image, you can see from fullspectrum.org.uk that each finger has its focus. And I remember when I did this course with Nigel, he mentioned things like, if you see this kind of speckling, it means there's a buildup of toxicity, as in, say, heavy metal toxins in that particular meridian channel. Same with that one. And again, when we see breaks in the field here, they all have significance. So I think it would be good for you guys to actually invite Nigel Garrin-Hutchins from Full Spectrum to give a presentation. I think it's a good opportunity. So our technology, and I'm sorry to show you a very pixelated image the first time round, our imaging system enables us to do the Kirlian effect, but without being restricted to a glass plate, because we're not putting a charge into the field to illuminate the plasma as you do with a bulb, which is what the Kirlian effect is stimulating the plasma to make it visible. We're able to observe the plasma emissions in their natural state. So we're not stimulating it, and it means we can travel around the entire body more like weather satellite than having to do just individual samples. So it does give us a wonderful overview, but obviously we can get up close as well. And here you can see a 3D image, which allows us to actually see the elevated meridians that are affected by something. In this case, there's a couple of them here. But obviously I've got a lot more of these images to show you, and this very pixelated one is famous for us because it's the first 3D image we took. And obviously the significance of that, we can see the nature of the biofield in 3D, whereas in 2D we just get a kind of gingerbread man slice. Well, of course, we honor you guys enormously. And like I said, we have calibrated all the devices we use in our studies with each other. And there's a great deal of significance in that calibration. And I really don't need to speak much to your process, but for the fact that it's been a great honor to serve alongside you guys. I was honored when, I was invited to speak at your annual conference. I don't know what that says. I think that says 9, is it? In St. Petersburg, and I'm honored to be here with you now. And also we had Krishna and Dimitri in India for a series of events around the country many years ago. I think it was 2011. That's many years ago, isn't it? So back to the Biofield Viewer. As I said, our system allows us to observe the energy field away from the body without stimulating it in any way. And that's quite significant because we really see it in its natural state. And we train people actually on site in their own clinics online because it's much easier for you to set up the equipment, start taking images of your own clients, some of whom you know very well, and then I'm there on Skype going, well, this means this, 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 and this, and you're both, how do you know that that all means that? And I obviously explain it, and then you come to be able to interpret images yourself. But the things that are significant in this image, for example, are the fact that he has a really beautiful symmetrical field. He's kept himself in very good order, this man. In his 60s, to be so vibrant and to have such bright colors on his field is really commendable. And he's obviously done a lot of intuitive work. You can see his bright brow chakra here. There are some issues. We do like seeing these thin pink lines. So when they thicken up, we're wondering what's going on. Obviously he's wearing shorts down here, so there's a certain artifact, but there's a certain amount of pooling at the throat here. So is this guy really saying what he means to say, or is he really being heard? It's a great issue in Asian communities, and a little bit of sensitivity here, perhaps to dust or pollution, and probably a bit too strong a hair dye for his hair. In Asia, again, they use a lot of chemicals, and they're very strong, and this one's even affected him on an energetic level. But otherwise, a really beautiful field. And that's how we interpret, you know, and if specific issues show up, we can relate to them and give people guidance, but it also allows us to prioritize through our practice and their modalities the way forward for an individual. It's and they can see, of course, what's going on. If you go to a practitioner, you may not know what he's going to do, but if you can see live and see all these energetic changes which improve clearly what you're seeing, even from a novice's perspective, then you're going to run with what they're doing, you're going to trust what they're doing, and that really helps. So addressing chakras, we really now have an opportunity with the different devices, BioWell, Biofield Viewer, to measure the actual chakras and see them, see what's going on live. And it's very important with language to honor an individual because they're all coming from a different environment. So we've got to really know what we're seeing. Sometimes people go in a bit gung-ho. I always think it's good to be gentle, observe, understand why someone's biofield the way it is. Obviously encourage them to enhance it and optimize it in every way. But when we see an image at a first baseline, you know, it's really lovely to track the process of our treatment. Whatever it is, the practitioner's got a lot of intuition. Once he focuses his intent through the treatment of balancing, he can see what he's doing. She can see what she's doing. It's like working with the lights on for everybody. It's brilliant. So the chakras have now well been categorized and catalogued. I mean, if you think about it, we're standing on this ball that's spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, you know, coupled in a solar system that's charging towards Hercules at we don't know what speed, and yet we feel perfectly still. That stillness is definitely engineered by our chakras, sort of little jet fires, plasma jets, all subconsciously keeping us absolutely in our stillness, under this illusion of stillness. So back to Valerie Hunt again. She was working out of UCLA in the 70s, and she also developed, along with her Aura camera, a very brilliant device for measuring the chakras. And we're delighted by her inspiration because the next generation of scientists has developed and delivered a tool recently to us where we can directly take these measurements as she was doing. And you can see from these very old-fashioned printout graphs that when someone's asked to meditate, a lot of that energy can be focused at the brown crown, whereas otherwise there's more kind of action going on as per the current requirement. And here it is. This is us, Kimberly, my partner, Kimberly Shipke, doing some investigations with the Kundalini Research Institute. And this is basically a seismograph which has been adapted to measure each chakra on an individual channel. So this would be a baseline where we're seeing a little bit of activity at the solar plexus and at the sacral chakra. And then we ask our rishi to send a signal through his brow chakra, and we can see at will. He's able to communicate directly from at will at each energy center. So it means we can do science now using this device, using BioCore alongside the BioWell and the Biofield Viewer. And we've just had this machine recently, we've done study. So if we travel around the spectrum, the global spectrum, I mean, these chakras, is it just a Vedic concept? Certainly we know the Theosophists picked up on it. And we've had some amazing tombs, the chakras itself, crikey, Charles Ledbetter, thank you, the Blavatsky team, and Lucis Trust. But it's not a new invention by any means. And if we visit the modern researchers who are digging up documents and cross-referencing, certainly have thousands of years of evidence of awareness of these energy centers. And perhaps if we travel to the Orient and look at the perspective of the Dan Tians and the Dan Tian, we're also speaking to this kind of focal point for correction, if you like, from the toroidal aspect of the human being. And when we look at the meridians, certainly taking a fresh look at the meridians, we've had for hundreds of years, certainly we've all visited schools where we have a figurine like these fellows with the 3D figurine. One in the museum there in the Royal Palace has a few extra points, I think. but clearly depicting where these points are, and a great deal of knowledge of their significance within the Oriental schools of healthcare. And it does corroborate, this is an important image which shows that the Vedic tradition with nadis also had these little mini chakra points, little mini fractal vortices, which they know as the Mama or Vama points. So you can cross-reference now acupuncture points, Mama points, and Vama points, along with some of the modern physics and tools that we have. For example, this is a Russian machine. I'm sure easy to get your hands on it. This is from 2004 in our lab. We got one of these. It's actually a Keelian device with a paddle. You can see the paddle there next to the machine. You hold it up over beside the body and it creates a Keelian effect. And so the acupuncture points just start illuminating. And so it would be it is a great training tool for schools working with even tapping and any kind of point-based modalities. Sorry about the glare on my glasses. Can't see without them. So jumping forward, and I have to say that some of these papers have been questioned, but I'm a dear friend of Joey Jones. He's now passed, but he's done hundreds of studies with modern tools, in this case the functional MRI, and we can see, this is important, okay, so down the bottom of the foot there's the vision point, okay? I think it's on gallbladder meridian, actually. So we stimulate that point, and you can see from the functional MRIs that a certain area of the brain is illuminated there in blue. Now, that's the same area, the visual cortex, as if I shine a light into this fellow's eye. So your Orientals are onto something. They're calling these points vision points, and sure enough, when we stimulate them, they affect the same area as if we shine a light in the eye. But what is hugely significant is that the stimulation, in this case a sonopuncture, reaches the brain from the eye if I shine a light in a quarter of a second. Whereas if I stimulate that toe 2 meters away, it happens super fast. In other words, even though the optic nerve is quite like fiber optic, quite high end, it's nothing like the speed of this fiber optic broadband superhighway meridian system that this one study speaks to. Amazing, amazing. So is there a fiber optic system that was yet to be discovered? Certainly, this compilation would have us believe so, Professor So. Premovascular system, make a note of it. These slides are all available on SlideShare. By all means, use them, the ones I'm presenting. If you just go slideshare.net, my name, there's a number of different slideshows you can access. So what are they saying? By staining these tiny vessels using very sophisticated microscopy available in and only in high-funded universities, and obviously that hasn't necessarily been open, that door, for a while, we're able to see these tiny filaments. Now this is a capillary, the smallest known vessel to date. But this tiny, tiny thing, like the strand of a spider's web, now being understood, matched, mapped, studied, and all these fabulous Koreans led by So, especially KS So, has been doing this research. Bit of a gruesome picture, but it really is like fiber optics. So what are we saying? A significant network of minute channels has been recently rediscovered with modern devices such as the electron microscope, which many of us understand to be the meridian system. Okay? Let me just make a point. I do have another slide that I could show you now, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to tell you a little story. We were speaking about Gray's Anatomy earlier. Gray's Anatomy, that wonderful tomb of human anatomy, which is a closed book in the sense that if you ask any anatomist, hey, is there anything left to be discovered about the human body? They may well arrogantly say, no, we know everything about the human body. Okay? They know how many bones there are, they know how many, they know everything about it, they would say. But in fact, I was excited when I was lecturing a few years ago to be able to say, well, did you know that two young Italian anatomists had discovered a new tendon in the knee? And everyone would be like, oh, wow, man, that was just a couple of years ago. Yeah, I think I remember that in the newspaper. Well, now, of course, we have this recent announcement that they've discovered a new organ we call the mesentery in the digestive system. Some would argue that we already knew about it, but there's been a big hoo-ha recently about the discovery of a new organ in the human body. So I think that does leave the door open a little bit to further discoveries, especially as these channels are very tiny. The type of Oriental medicine scientists would not have access to necessarily this type of equipment until more recently. But certainly, watch this space. Premovascular system is there first to develop in the embryo. Sound familiar? Kind of matrix, a spider's web upon which the cellular structure develops. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of a digression with you, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope I'm still with you and you're with me, because that was some of the science that frames up our subject. And this particular presentation is about the chakras. And I think it's important for us to get perhaps an understanding of what the chakras are actually doing for us on a sort of functional level. And I like to use this slide as a kind of segue into this subject, because it enables me to allow a kind of a trick, if you like, an energetic tool, where we take something that we think is a certain dimension, and we always think it's been like that, and we can open it. And it suddenly allows for a new insight. And we're about to do this opening right now with the yin-yang, because many of us are familiar with this symbol. And it's meaning of balance, and some would say duality, harmony, Oriental symbol. And I think even it would be one of those signposts that many of us would agree that we saw very early on our journey. But the yin-yang is a cartoon. It's a graffiti. It's a flat painted thing with a brush, black and white. In other words, just a black painted brush. And yet it's trying to depict something else. And that thing isn't this flat balance duality concept. It's actually the toroid. And we're seeing how that dimensionality opens up in this same slide, where the two dots in the yin-yang are actually the top and bottom of this toroidal shape. So it's an esoteric symbol that needs to come with the story. And if you don't hear the story, it's just a symbol of balance. You're in the sandpit still with your duality. But if you get the lesson, you realize it's this invisible aspect of self. And it's funny, you know, the whole wave particle experiment where effectively reality is blinking between a wave state and a particle state. Well, I think that's the story of modern medicine. We have particle medicine, biophysics, pharmaceuticals, but we also have wave state medicine, and that's all the healing and energy medicine modalities. And they're served by tools like the BioWell and the Biofield Viewer. And we need to understand this blinking nature of self, so that we can finally integrate the two understandings of observing the self in particle and wave state. So let's move on. This toroid really is the story, the sort of top that sets spinning for 80 or 100 years if we're lucky now. The crown and the base chakra clearly showing their kind of trumpet-like nature, sort of perfect satellite dish to receive cosmic signals and to ground into earth energies. And of course, from a clairvoyant perspective, we all look like a kind of spawn, a frog spawn of these toroids, all interlocking and enveloping as we come into contact with each other. And a healthy field is spinning and nourishing itself in a straight, harmonized way with the Earth's axis. But if you're currently constantly affected by things, we call the pitch and yaw of your field can be affected, like a boat. And as a healer, we can observe these slight changes in pitch and yaw, and that would be very significant, especially if you're aware of the assemblage point, which is the central point. And there's a couple of energy vampires in there. They're constantly, you may find your field is flared up like this because it's a defense system. But from an assemblage point of view, you would expose yourself to sensitivities because your center of gravity, of consciousness, is being affected. Assemblage point obviously is from more shamanic tradition, where it's not the heart chakra, but it's the center of that vortex at the heart level. So I hope I've tweaked you guys a little bit, because this is more a little journey now into the chakras, and it's fun, and I hope you enjoy it, because I think it'll allow you to see how simple they are and how wonderfully they serve us. And here we go. So what I'd like you to do is imagine sitting in school at a desk with a piece of paper and a pencil like you have before you, and you're just putting a dot, a nice dot, on this piece of paper. Now the teacher will say, this is one dimension, 1D, okay? And if you will allow me, imagine that is you, right at the perineum, right at the base chakra. That 1D point is there, okay? And imagine where we are right now is at your very birth, okay? So we have a pencil point in a classroom, imaginary, connecting us in an imaginary way with this base chakra, the point, okay? And if I'm losing you, I'm going to get you. This is 1D. And if we look traditionally at 1D, it's connected with the earth element, the point, the base chakra, fight or flight, and the potential world, the world of potential. Now notice in this slide, I've already got some lines drawn out from my point, okay? It's heading towards, this is 2D now, okay, as we create something on the paper, okay? Now that's me in the middle, or you, and then it's the energy connection between me and my mum, me and my sister, me and my brother, me and my uncle, me and my other brother, me and my dad. All these lines are the lines from when we first take our breath, and we see our mum and the nurse and our dad, and we get to know all our family as we get home. these lines take us into this 2D. So we're still matchstick men, we're still pictures on paper, but from an energetic perspective, we've already addressed the functionality of the base chakra, grounding. And now we're looking at the navel chakra, connected not with earth, but with water, the second element, okay? The geometry 2D is to create that from the 1D to mum, to dad, to the other, the other, the other, the other. So we're getting to know ourselves, our spatial awareness, because of all these other characters in our lives, okay? This is the emerging world. And of course, it's not real because this is not a world we live in. This is cartoon world. But stick with me. This is 2D, the second chakra. It's all about relationships. Chakra 1, 1D, is all about earth, anger, fear, fight or flight, unconscious, okay? So now, starting to get really real, we have 3D, okay? So what do I mean by that? The base chakra creates the potential world, this link, this little connect. We're born and we start relationships at the navel chakra. They're always with us. These bonds, these entanglements are always with us at the umbilical cord, that region, literally. But now when we go to 3D, this world is starting to emerge out of the paper. And here we can see a 3-dimensional figure. This is our real world, isn't it? The 3D world, where the element is fire. The connect is with space. Obviously, 3D is space. The chakra is the solar plexus. So I, in 1D, getting to know you in 2D, I've now become spatially aware of myself. That's sitting here on 3D at the solar plexus. Okay? So in other words, I have all of the equipment to navigate this 3D world between the base chakra, which grounds me to earth, the navel chakra through water element, which connects me with all of my relationships, and then back through fire, chemistry, heat, heartbeats, the warmth, through myself. So my ego, myself is here at the solar plexus, so a bit lower, at the solar plexus. So in other words, the lower 3 chakras are subconsciously managing our experience in space, okay? And this, as you can see, 3D is the material world, self-awareness, willpower. So lower 3 chakras, going back there, combining earth, water, and fire, the elements that you need for physicality, a bit of chemistry to add mud and water, fire it makes a cup. Yeah, those 3 elements make me, the physical body, and they allow this process to go on. But of course, what is 3D? I'll show you. I'm sure you're all going to do really good impressions as well. This is 3D right now. I'm here in space, but nothing's happening. There's nothing happening because there's no time. I need time for this spatial experience to happen, okay? And this is the real crux of understanding the chakras, because the lower 3 chakras are very subconsciously giving us this surfboard that we can navigate life, okay? The wave that we're actually riding is called time. And the wave of time happens right now. It doesn't happen, you know, like, oh, I'm going to sit in here and reminisce about, you know, what we did during the war, or I'm going to mind fuck worrying about what's happening next week. Forget it. Now happens now. The 3D spatial experience that our lower 3 chakras allow us, really provide the opportunity for this energy center to beautifully ride where I'm the surfboard on time, and for all the rest of this equipment to be here with it. Okay, I don't want to lose you, so let's look at this. The fourth dimension, as we understand science, is time. So we speak to space-time, don't we? The space-time continuum. Well, let's look at the heart for a minute. I'm suggesting that the physical heart is the clock, and the heart chakra is the connection for us with now, with time. Time's an illusion in many ways. I mean, we're sitting on a ball, it's spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. The sun's just sitting there shining one long sunny day. But because our ball flips around, we have this day-night thing, 24 hours. So we already have got a bit of a misunderstanding about what really time is. And of course, we need day and night for the way that we evolved to work. We need that time. So the heart is the clock. And of course, when the Greeks first measured the heartbeat, it beats at 60 beats per minute. You know, we're only 70, 80, 90 over because we're in a fucking rush. Excuse my French. Modern man is in a rush. And we don't need to be in a rush because it means we're tripping time. We're rushing over time. Whereas time is happening right now. And of course, this is the spiritual experience when an individual is able to not just be unaware of surfing now and the wave of time. They're just being a human doing, and they're not even aware of this fabulous opportunity, because when you've got the lower three chakras creating the platform and the heart chakra is open and at one with time, and all of our other equipment can do what it does best, which is operate. Most people are just driving around in a car they think has got 4 gears, literally, whereas some of us can work interestingly beyond space and time. And that's, for example, why we're able to do studies and prove the efficacy of distant healing, where we study in the lab a number of cases, but the practitioner's on the other side of the planet. But when they start healing, it works instantaneously. So that's because healers have created a triage between their communication system, their intention system, and their connection with the divine. It's a triage, and it's riding above space-time. And of course, on that level, we can do just about anything, including make crop circles or whatever we want. And it's important for us to understand this, you know, these other blades we have in the Swiss Army knife of our toolkit. But by looking at it from the dimensional perspective, and of course in string theory we can speak to 11, 22, 27 dimensions. I'm only speaking about the 7 here that relate to the body perspective, the body range, where we're hanging in this range of opportunities and dimensions, and we have physicality, especially in these 4 dimensions, and a bit beyond, of course. So taking our story forward, the 4th dimension is time. It's the heart. By opening up our hearts to the nowness of loving and sharing and consciousness, we're able to be dynamic within the magical world rather than just, dare I say, a victim of the magical world. So let's look at this from an elemental perspective. We're all very familiar in the classroom with solid, liquid, and gas. But what we're measuring in all of our work with subtle energy is primarily plasma. We're actually measuring the 4th state of matter. So we talk about biophotonic emissions. That's plasma emitting from the field out of all of the acupuncture points and the tiny energetic emission points. It makes up entire field. When we're doing BioWell, GDV or Kirlian, we're illuminating and stimulating the bioplasma so that it's visible. The solid, liquid, gas aspect of modern medicine is well understood in a clinical hospital environment, but this plasma aspect, we've had to wait for modern technology, modern tools, which allow us to measure and with repeatable equipment calibrate this state, if you like. And from my analogy with dimensionality, that's just the lower 4 dimensions. And yet, where does this go on? I mean, what we're suggesting the 5th state of matter is quintessence, a kind of information state, but maybe it's a dynamic plasma. Maybe it's actually ether or chi or pran, plasma, which is the difference is plasma and then bioplasma. We don't know. We have to calibrate this. This is why this workshop is presented to you as theory in this point, rather than, we need to fill in some of these gaps. But anyway, the 5th dimension, of course, would relate to the throat chakra from our analogy. And here we can see the miraculous world. We have space-time, and we also have space-time, yeah? So space-time is at the throat chakra, where we're actually here now communicating, yeah? I can speak to everybody on the internet right now from here with intention. I can say exactly what I meant to say right now, okay? And that is the important Kundalini, bringing our center of consciousness, not our center of gravity, but our center of consciousness up to our throat chakra as a teacher, or up to our brow. And then, as I mentioned before, this fabulous triage we can do when we're actually healing, when we're grounding. If we don't have this connection with the crown, obviously we're not going to be doing very much healing. We're going to be probably drawing on others. So in this analogy, the 6th dimension is addressing intuition, the psychic world, the intuitive world, the world of intention. And then 70, the divine world, ecstasy, atonement, Christ consciousness. So is it possible for us to map and understand the spiritual journey from a dimensional perspective, from a chakra perspective, look at people's images of biofield sources, if you like, and help them make the next step of their journey? I believe there is. And of course, we've got a huge number of tools now. When we first started measuring the biofield, we didn't necessarily know what we were seeing. We had to cross-reference with other healers and say, if we see a blockage in this area, or if we see energy in this area, what does it mean to you as a clairvoyant? Now, of course, you can go online and explore any number of different maps. You see here, a heart chakra functioning correctly is green frequency and harmonized, nice bright green, resonating with whatever this love, human, natural harmonic is. But it can easily get tinged with envy or sadness and reveal completely different patterns that relate to, say, grief, for example. Okay, so let's have a look at the latest version of our technology, the Biofield Viewer. And we have different modes. So you can see a representation that corresponds with the systems of the body. So respiration, elimination, for example. And in this case, I scan the sky. I can make a composite, and it's nice to get about a third of the person you're imaging in the image. So instead of zooming all the way back, better to take bottom half and top half, and then you get as much information. And we love symmetry in a biofield image. Whenever we see pooling, it catches our eye. And then whenever we see asymmetry, it catches our eye. So this really is a quite healthy guy with a little bit of a niggle about communication and a little bit of a niggle about digestion, which would probably indicate that he's got some family issues, male side here. So this is probably not brilliant communication with his father as he was growing up, which has affected his digestion and his affected ability to communicate. So modern energy therapies are really good like that, because we can just guide people and they can get over that, digest the traumas they've had, and then they don't have issues with male domineering type characters anymore, because it's not triggering that trauma in their field. They've digested it, and even their own digestion improves. So we also have Chakra Viewer, which is another setting. And as you can see, we don't see the person anything like, we don't see the person anything like us clearly, but we can address things. Remember I mentioned this area of sadness and grief? And we can see a big pool on the guy's back here. So the first question I would ask him is, are you experiencing sadness or grief? And of course, if he goes, yeah, how did you know that? That's a kind of another chink to opening the channel of trust, because if I ask the right questions of this individual, we're going to be able to quickly move on to the actual intervention. But also he's going to be like, wow, I've got 4 or 5 little issues, and these guys picked each one of them up one after the other, even in the right order. And speaking of the right order, interestingly, notice there's a lot of pooling down the legs here. We like to see thin pink lines. So when we see pooling like this, it means this guy is not grounded. Maybe he spends too much time living in a high-rise apartment, wears thick rubber soles, drives around in a rubber-soled car, tires, and clearly isn't getting grounded, earthed properly. So, and interestingly, if we see this and we don't address it, other issues don't respond to our interventions nearly as well. So whenever we see this kind of grounding issue, we like to deal with it straight away, and then we can move on with other areas. In other words, you've got to address the basics first. So Chakra Viewer gives us a wonderful opportunity. It's not a medical assessment. This is a reading of someone's energy, like a palm reading. There's a video camera pointed at them, and then all we're doing is, with the software, is optimizing the relationship between the light that's been emitted from the body and our light source. So we get these fabulous interference patterns. And if you study enough people and tweak your technique, you could eventually land on something which is hugely significant and very, very useful. So why aren't you going forward anymore? Okay. And as I said, there's a huge amount of corroboration. You just need to visit any number of different biofield energy therapy type modalities, and the same areas show up with the same story. So we've now got a great deal of corroboration between so many different modalities. This is a biofield anatomy chart, from Eileen McCusick, who founded a group called Biofield Tuning. And Kimberly is a practitioner of this. They strike a tuning fork on a puck, and they can hear the same energetic imbalances that we can see with the Biofield Viewer. And it's interesting because they've got wonderful techniques of identifying with some kind of imbalance, and then by making the system aware of this dissonance, it self-corrects. So we're really realizing that sound-based modalities and gentle modalities actually inspire the body to heal itself really quickly and without side effects. It's healthcare 2.0 right now. And it's pioneers like Eileen McCusick and, of course, Korotkov, teams like mine that are developing the tools that can separate the BS, the Mickey Mouse, the fraudsters, because this is an invisible world. We need to show up the real practitioners. We need to see schools using our tools to certify their practitioners before they unleash them on an unsuspecting public. So here we see a headshot with the Chakra Viewer. we're always concerned when we see darker, murky colors. But we like thin pink lines. We like symmetry. So this is an interesting image. Here there's all kinds of things going on. You see what's happening? The heart chakra has gotten very compacted and dark. And so the solar plexus is opened up really wide to try and sort of get some fire under there. But actually, it's a risky move to have your solar plexus wide open like this. You can pick up all kinds of other stuff. So we're actually seeing an onset into disease. Post-energetic self-corrective measures have gotten compromised, and so this is really a perfect opportunity for intervention. Of course, dark communication and heart centers means this is quite an interesting case. Someone who's shielding himself, like a kind of and symmetry's gone. Yeah, in many areas. Now, in terms of research, this paper, Jeffrey Tarrant, dear new colleague of ours, a professor at Missouri University, did a wonderful study with pranic healing with the Biofield Viewer and the modern brain mapping technology. And it was interesting when they recorded the biofields of a number of adepts, the trainers who've been meditating for many years. Their fields were already very brilliant, and they plateaued a great level of brilliance. But the novices in the study, they had fragmented, disturbed fields, but very quickly, after just a few days of practice, they were already getting up to the level of the experienced practitioners. So what that tells us is that whatever we do and whatever health state we're now, just by starting something sensible like Tai Chi or yoga or Reiki or pranic healing or whatever it is, will really help you early on. And that advantage is worth grabbing a hold of. So it doesn't take years and years and years to benefit from something. The most benefit happens in the first few weeks. So I hope that inspires you to go out on that Tai Chi course you've been promising yourself. And of course, Biofield Viewer is a live system. So it allows us to see the energy field live. So when somebody's moving, we see the energetic changes, but the baseline, in this case, you can see a bit of shielding over the brow chakra remain, so we can help individuals. And when we come to doing an actual reading, we can see when someone's heart center is shielded, the solar plexus may open up to try and support it. We can notice injuries that are long-standing, that have kind of even entered into the deepest field, holding on emotionally to stuff as well. And in this case, of course, clearly someone who's, this is a chakra view, with a very beautiful heart center, a bit of shielding over her own sort of sense of self, but a real turbulence in the area we associate with relationships. So she obviously had been to see her doctor and got medicine for irritable bowel syndrome, which was the symptoms. But my recommendation for her from an energetic reading perspective is, well, actually support what you're doing with communicating with the family, because this is all about relationships. And I guess, because it's over here on the left side, your daughter and you have had a fallout. And she said, yes, that's right. And I said, well, my prescription, my recommendation is for you to call your daughter, because I bet your symptoms and your irritable bowel syndrome story has gone on about as long as you've been estranged from her. And she was like, that's it, 2 years ago, we had an argument. I've not spoken to her. I've not seen my grandchildren. That's when all this thing all started. I'm obviously medicating at the moment, but it's still really upset. And I said, yeah, I can see that. And I said, best way out of this hole is communicate obviously with your doctor about the meds, but let's address the underlying emotional imbalance. Call your daughter. Time heals. 2 years down the line, the grandchildren and your daughter would love to see you. Call her up, go and have tea. That's the way that we can enhance the medical colleagues and their medical perspective. And it doesn't much to equip yourselves with the technology that we're using. You can see this is an LED light, perfectly useful for creating a standardized environment. And then this is a $50–60 Logitech camera, C920, which will attach to a tripod, importantly. And then, of course, we supply you with the software, and then you can take an image, and this would be a nice blank white wall somewhere in your facility. If you don't have a blank wall, you can get one of those pull-down blinds, a matte blind. And of course, this is the baseline that we guide you to take, and what you're seeing are these are gradations of light intensity. So it's brightest up there where it's yellow, and then when someone comes and stands in that environment, we see how they affect it and how their body surface, which you call the etheric layer, which you also measure with the BioWell, the etheric layer, that's the surface, we can see the functionality and the symmetry. And this lady actually was blessing us with the session as she was just a few hours away from leaving us. She died about 12 hours after taking these pictures, but she wanted us to see how someone prepares themselves. And this great big white light halo opened around her, and it's beautiful. So Biofield Viewer, as I said, is live. So we can film somebody treating somebody, and we can see the changes that occur in the different chakras. Obviously, if someone's arm is overlapping, you'll have some artifact, but we train people to understand all of this. I wonder whether this is going to show, yeah. And what's interesting is that we actually get kind of pulses when somebody steps up out of one kind of range into the next range. You can see a lot of wonderful activity down here at the solar plexus, lots of orange coming in. Beautiful colours, very intuitive brow centre. Bit of pooling in the jaw, a bit of dental story. I recommend oil pulling there.
Bone marrow inside the clavicle and the ribs. Marrow is like hard.
Anyway, I think I played that twice now. But I was in the loop. Okay, so as I said, the Biofield Viewer has very versatile tools within it. Here you can see the frame of the page in 3D mode. So we have different color sets, different quality of image. This is a high quality image here. You can actually see the actual nature of the solar plexus here. It's interesting that there's quite a lot of shielding going on here, but like a great big, almost like an atoll right across the belly there. And what we're understanding with the 3D, especially in subtle mode, this is like the Kirlian effect. When we see these really high peaks on moles especially, that could be suggestive of unusual activity. So we might need to calibrate and send someone along to an oncologist when we see those really high peaks on moles. And of course, in places like Australia and the New World, where they have a lot of skin cancer, this may be a tool. I'm not suggesting for a minute that we've catalogued and defined this, but our early studies are indicating. So how do we take an image of the biofield and interpret it? Well, in modern scientific process, many colleagues use a program called ImageJ, and it's actually approved by a great number of international or health authorities for image analysis, whether it's a microscope image of a stained cell or whether it's a full body image. And our studies, published studies, support that a significant improvement in someone's biofield is if we see the red pixels going down and the number of green pixels going up and the number of red pixels going down. This is a very basic example, but we're able to make a composite, a wave shape of an individual's biofield, and therefore compare this to hundreds of others and compare this as the interventions occur. Okay. So you don't often always have the chance to do full body screening, so it's good to know that every facet of the human body can be read with expertise, whether it's the tongue or the ear or the face, and obviously we can take images of these things, the feet from a reflexology perspective. So even if you're in a kind of a busy health camp and hundreds of people, you can still see what's going on by looking at the face and the feet and the hands. Our technology obviously has a great deal of repeatability. Here you can see we've just taken an image of an individual every week for 3 weeks, and his kind of atmospheric signature is the same in each of these different images. Unless he suddenly had an intervention of some kind, we'd see that same signature. But Biofield Viewer is a live system, so we can observe healing actually as it's going on. And this is a wonderful experience, actually on stage, showing a kind of huge audience of people what these boys are doing on the screen. And of course, as we widen our understanding, modern medicine really doesn't serve very well in the way that Ayurveda does. Ayurveda has an entire branch of healthcare dealing with bhoots or entities. Modern medicine defers to the church and to exorcists, but if you go to a hospital environment, you can see all kinds of young souls flying around the operating theatres like this, and they're often looking for a snug, warm place. And if the maternity ward is not separated, not sterilised by energetic practitioners, you may find young ladies being misdiagnosed with postnatal depression, when actually that womb that they've delivered their baby is just being reoccupied by a sort of errant soul. And it's about time we had some serious grown-up conversations about this and integrated our understanding and knowledge. Another interesting perspective, this lady, as I understand it, had a heart transplant from an African-American lady. And you can see very clearly in this image that it's not just the heart that she takes on. And there's clearly the African-American face can be seen. But you can also see a number of other faces. This is the original lady's face. This is a device called Bioilluminator, which creates a torsion generator. So you can take a picture and you can see this lady. We switch on the Bioilluminator and suddenly we can see her original face. All kinds of other entities have been let in, purely because we've not honoured and understood that organ transplant comes with a whole load of other aspects that causing all kinds of damage to individuals. Perhaps the whole of psychiatry is a little upset because we don't understand and we don't look in on this particular aspect of humanity and wellness. Okay, well, it's a bit of a strong subject to end on, but I think that is a good introduction to my work and the efforts that we've been employing over the last few years, using these various different devices, such as the Biofield Viewer and the BioWell. I hope you've enjoyed that, and of course some link for you. You can actually get hold of Biofield Viewer yourself. We've tried to make it affordable, and if you look at our little store on biofieldviewer.com, you can follow the process there. But in terms of access to the research, Biofield Viewer does have quite a busy page on Facebook. So if you wanted to visit some of the events, there's all kinds of lectures and links, and at least 200 papers you can access through some of the events. And I can also, if you email me directly, I'd be more than happy to send you papers on biophotonic emissions, biofield science, and premovascular system. I've got quite a set. But anyhow, if any of you have got questions, do just jump in. I'm here, ready to go. And obviously, if we get a stony silence because you're all overwhelmed, then by all means email me a question, and I'm sure we can reconvene somehow, somewhere. And my email address is thornton.streeter@gmail.com. So how you spell Thornton is THORNTON dot, and then Streeter STREETER @gmail.com. But don't believe everything you read online. Certainly colleagues like us in this field do get slagged off a bit by the skeptics, and we do face them every day. But if you're genuinely interested in what we're doing, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube and on slideshare.net, as I mentioned. Oh, I've got so many chats. Do I need to go to this? Are there questions here? Oh, okay, brilliant. Okay, cool. No, I think that's all dealt with. So, Malcolm, Maria, am I taking your leave?
I don't know. Guys, do you have any questions? Malcolm, Alexa?
It's been so vast and such a vast subject with all the different aspects of it. No questions. I probably have a million questions. But we don't have time for them.
Okay, but listen, I just wanted you to know that, as I've been mentioning, slideshare.net, if you go there, search my name, maybe not exactly the slideshow that I've just gone through, but one very similar to it is available. So if you want to revisit a slide, get a reference to any of the papers, that's all on there. Otherwise, you can get hold of my research through researchgate.net, and then the one is academia.edu through MIT, our Indian college. Okay, so that's brilliant. Well, I've got to go and see my mum now, so I'm going to go and see her. I'm sure she'll be very happy I'm there early. And I'm beaming at you from lovely Devon. It's nice to have such a brilliant European flavour to this event. And of course, it's recorded now, so other colleagues can see it. I don't know what I have to do to ring off. I suppose I can just click away and then I've gone. But Maria, thank you very much for organising this. I look forward to meeting you. You'll have to invite us to come in person to one of your events, and we'll come and do our event with you.
It will be a pleasure. I will talk to Kirill. It will be a pleasure to invite you, really. Thank you very much. It was very exciting, and we need some time to digest it because it's very deep.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you very much.
We will keep in touch, of course. And
send my love to Kirill.
Okay, have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Bye, guys. Have a nice day.
See you, everyone.
Bye, thank you.